This is Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoyn Herbert, and I bring revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on Ground Zero and across the globe.
Several voices are speaking against calls for extended ghost towns. I am Innocent.
Wednesday was a great day for Ambazonia before the UK House of Lords, even if on Ground Zero, the BOYO regime continued to pursue its military slaughter of Ambazonians. This is Brooke Stone.
Lord Boateng set the stage by making it abundantly clear that the plight of Ambazonians and the colonial domination they face is unique. This is C. Ajimbo Ambi.
Ambazonians have cried loudly for nearly 6 decades while the world has royally ignored them. This is Jude Agua Ozugen for Ambazonia Calling.
There is no worse crime than for Western powers to pay lip service to human rights and yet allow thousands of Ambazonians to be slaughtered under their watch. This is Willibrod Ade.
The British government is beginning to feel the heat. This is Divine Angie.
It is very obvious that British MPs do not believe in Bia's insistence on using a military solution to a political problem. This is Manjong Jude Ambe.
Lord McConnell sees no solution unless the Cameroons first returns to federalism. This is the monk.
As the patron saint of election rigging and misrule, Bia's power of experience is in agony, despite his newly rigged 7th mandate.
This is
Tata Mentan.
Who is the Nyamfuka of the week? We have a surprise for you. You are listening to Ambazonia Calling, and I'm Veronique Vetimfe.
With what else could we possibly start Ambazonia Calling this Sunday morning than with a tribute to General Amigo and his fellow comrades in arms? The brave ones never die. Like funds, they go missing. Their fire burns out only to be replaced by 1,000 other flames, by 1,000 other brave ones, enrolling willingly, offering their lives for Mother Ambazonia. Such is the tribute that the grateful Ambazonia pays to General Amigo and to the soldiers whose lives were cut short when they were ambushed and executed while attending a funeral at Kuchu in Bello in the northern zone of Ambazonia. From prison, another hero and another prisoner without a crime, Oben Maxwell Road. We have lost a friend, a brother, a husband, a comrade, and above all, a great fighter and a soldier in the revolution. Nothing is more deserving to be offered to the fallen heroes in arms, writes Oben Maxwell, than highest honor and respect. They paid the highest price that we might live in abundance of freedom. His death will inspire thousands of men and women to continue on the same path. His spirit will fight alongside until freedom comes to Ambazonia. Rest in peace, General Amigo, and all the fallen heroes of this week, in their several dozens, all executed by cowardly soldiers of the colonizers, seeking to take over a land that they will only own by killing every single one of us. Adios, amigo. Ambazonia Calling received news just before going on the air that ADF forces had reposted attacks by the military in Awing, and that in counterattacks that they had launched, they had reportedly completely overrun the outposts of Cameroon's terrorist forces in Awing. It is information that Ambazonia Calling has not yet independently verified.
There are two Cameroons that came together. If you are telling us that what happened in Cameroon is like dropping a few cubes of sugar into a basin of water, who is the sugar and who is the water?
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner for the Nyamfuka of the Week. And we are not done until we have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling.
Looting, endless shooting, burning, raping, and the slaughter of innocent civilians. Those are some of the words that best describe what is going on in the towns of Kumbu, Mwa, and Du in the Bui and DONGA-MANTUNG states of Ambazonia. It follows a week during which scores of Ambazonians, mostly young people, were slaughtered by Cameroonian colonial forces in several states, including NDIAN, Meme, MOMO, Bui, BOYO, and DONGA-MANTUNG states. Here is Innocentia with the first part of our news wrap-up for the week.
Several British members of parliament called Wednesday for the deployment of peacekeepers to stop the genocide in Ambazonia and reaffirm the right of Ambazonians to assert their sovereignty. MPs challenged the UK government to undertake concrete measures and deploy resources to help arrest the armed violence that has, so far, killed thousands, internally displaced 500,000 people and left 3.3 million others in need of humanitarian assistance. The initiative was led by Lord Boateng, who admitted to having connections in Cameroon and southern Cameroon through his non-profit organizations, including one that distributes books in communities of need. General Amigo has been laid to rest in his native village of BOYO State. Prior to his burial Saturday, his mangled, lifeless, half-naked body was on public display Friday in Belo, showcasing a signature sight and act of La République du Cameroon soldiers who undress armed and unarmed Ambazonians alike and plant Dane guns and fetishes on the victims to post-mortemly justify their executions. Fidelis Chiaba, aka General Amigo, and two of his lieutenants were reportedly returning from a funeral Friday in Kuchu, a village in BOYO State. As many as 5 other mourners with no connections to General Amigo were randomly killed at the funeral. Many others were reportedly tormented. Sisiko Ayuk Tabe, jailed leader of the Ambazonian independence group known as the Interim Government, and 9 other defendants arrested since January 5th in Nigeria, appeared for a second time in court Thursday. The sitting judge of the Yaoundé Court of Appeal rejected their habeas corpus and remanded them back to jail until trial begins at a date yet to be determined. Unknown sources touched the family home of the wife of Cameroon's Prime Minister, Philemon Yang. Unimpeachable sources confirmed to Ambazonia Calling that the siblings of Linda Yang received multiple phone calls demanding that they pay a ransom or face the consequences, including the burning down of the family home in Belo. According to sources, it was between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. Thursday night that the house was set ablaze. On the heels of the killing of General Amigo in BOYO Friday, reliable sources are reporting an ongoing succession crisis among forces loyal to Chris Bongam and late General Amigo of the BOYO Council, both proxies of the interim government group. Sources say Chris Bongam and the diaspora-based BOYO Council favor a certain Commander Bullet. Looming large is the continuing detention of General RK, whereas he spoke at the burial Saturday of his late friend and captor, General Amigo. Tensions were reportedly high as attempts to reconcile both camps collapsed, thanks to stories that RK loyalists were responsible for betraying the whereabouts of General Amigo to the Cameroon army. Observers have maintained meantime that General Amigo had become expendable for failing in his primary assignment of kidnapping and killing General RK before public opinion turned against the interim government group and their proxies, the Ambazonian Self-Defense Council, ASC, and a certain BOYO council who masterminded or justified the kidnapping. In a related development, 73 hours given by forces loyal to General RK for his immediate release expired this Sunday morning with uncertainty as to what happens next following the untimely ambush of General Amigo by La République du Cameroon forces. General RK remains in captivity and his loyalists had promised an unprecedented bloodbath in BOYO, failing his release. You are listening to Ambazonia Calling. I am Ntumfoyn.
You have plenty of show yet to come, so don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
The people of West Cameroon cannot be your slaves. The people of West Cameroon are not, you did not conquer them in war. The problem we have in West Cameroon is the problem that will bring down Cameroon. When people have had pent-up anger and pain, humiliation, for over 50 years, when it bursts out, you will never be able to control it.
A general invitation has now been issued to all Ambazonians to attend a General Assembly of Ambazonians. They can come as individuals, as groups, as group leaders, or as floor members of organizations. That General Assembly has been convened for Boston, Massachusetts. Here in the United States of America, it holds next December 7, 8, and 9. Dr. Lizambe does not speak for the organizers or the conveners, but she certainly speaks for those who support the conference, as we do here at Ambazonia Calling. Here's Dr. Lizambe making a pitch.
The only way to change something is to stand up and do something and be the change that you want to see. So this is our chance to change the course of this revolution. I am not currently in the planning committee, but I intend to be present at this General Assembly so that together with my brothers and sisters, people of goodwill, people who have nothing to gain except to see a free Ambazonia, so that together with these good people, we can put our heads together and see what we can do to rescue a revolution that appears to be in free fall. If you are that person, who puts nation about individual personalities, come to Boston on December 7th, 8th, and 9th. Come and let's see what we can do. This may be the first of many meetings. We are not saying that it will resolve all the problems that we have, but we must start somewhere and take matters into our own hands. So I ask you, will you be there?
When injustice becomes law, resistance becomes a duty.
Let me now bring back Ntumfoyn, who owes us the second part of our news wrap-up for the week.
Several homes and businesses were burnt Friday night in Banso by forces of La République du Cameroon that were reportedly speaking the native language, Lamso. Unconfirmed reports say traditional doctors were also spotted at the local gendarmerie, purportedly providing information and tips on how the foreign army could neutralize what is said to be the mystical powers of some Amba boys. Seven more Ambazonians were killed in Binka, Arandu in DONGA-MANTUNG state on Wednesday 14th. The scene was stage-managed yet again to show that these were Amba boys because they had den guns and wore red fetishes. Whereas many have been quick to point an accusing finger at the Fulani cattle herdsmen for betraying hideouts of the freedom fighters, many more are pointing to the fact that the Fulanis are part and parcel of Ambazonia and are just as much victims of the machinations and cruelty of private militias set up by ex-convict and current Minister of Cameroon's Ministry of Territorial Administration, Paul Atanganji. A summary of an independent study under the University of Missouri School of Law has been making social media rounds. Jurist Dr. Valentine Ghana argues in the paper titled "The Genocide in Ambazonia, a Case for Robust Engagement by the United Nations," that the only logical, factual, historical, and legal conclusion from the United Nations resolutions and articles examined in the study is that the erstwhile British Trust Territory of Southern Cameroons was never decolonized. Largely welcome on social media, a main critique is that the author reverts to the theory that there was no independence. The critique further reads, quote, "Independence is declared or proclaimed and deemed to have been achieved on the date of declaration or proclamation marked for its coming into effect. It is the case not only for Ambazonia, but for all nations," end quote. Mutation is reporting that Michel Mbiemtong, publisher of the website Hurry News, has been arrested and locked up in Kondangi. The journalist, well known for his support and sympathy of the Ambazonia cause, was arrested Thursday and charged with encouraging state terrorism and injurious language towards President Paul Biya of Cameroon. Finally, Cardinal Tumi's Anglophone General Conference begins holding November 21st through the 22nd in Boya against the backdrop of security threats and calls for extended ghost towns across Ambazonia called by the interim government group.
The government is declaring a complete shutdown of our territory for 5 days, with a ghost town beginning November the 19th through to November the 23rd.
It would be recalled that the certificate manufacturing fraud and mayor of Boya, Patrick Ekema, promised that no way, no how was the conference going to hold in Boya.
Not even an ant shall be allowed movement within those days. No entry in and out of Ambazonia.
Several voices are speaking against calls for extended ghost towns, qualifying them as an act of intolerance that forecloses the space for political discourse in an independent Ambazonia. Innocent Chia for Ambazonia Calling.
Welcome to our special interview segment, The Devil Unmasked, The Truth Out.
Welcome, Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta, to The Devil Unmasked. It would seem that Biya's 7th term in office is off to a very rocky start.
Thanks, dear, and let us jointly unmask the apple stuck in the throat of Lucifer Biya Paul as he staggers like a scarecrow into his 7th term of office.
Biya has reigned as God Almighty in Cameroon for 36 years now, or is it as Lucifer Almighty? This time around, the word we are hearing out there is that he's got something stuck in his throat like a hot potato, or is it hot alligator pepper? How did this ill omen come about?
On the 11th of October 2018, Ntumfoyn, the Financial Times of London, wrote what I will summarize for our listeners as an answer to your question. Let me quote, "Cameroon is the great unspoken African tragedy in the making. Its president, Paul Biya, has been in power since 1982. If ever a country needed presidential term limits, it is this one. He has maneuvered his way through ongoing post-election turmoil to secure another 7-year stint to be 92 by the time the next polls fall due in 2025. The abuses that Mr. Biya has presided over are less publicized, but he is no less ruthless and desperate. When he first became head of state, his country had a highly educated population and diversified economy, every bit promising. His rule has been a slow-burning disaster ever since, characterized by grand-scale corruption, political repression, and growing division. With every passing year, the likelihood of a tragic denouement to his presidency has risen. Last presidential elections took place to a backdrop of simmering conflict in the north of the country, where the army is fighting Islamic militants from the Boko Haram cult. In the northwest and southwest of the country, restorationists from the English-speaking minority are waging a liberation war. Rather than seek to defuse the resulting uprising with a dialogue, Mr. Biya has chosen to put it down with force. Predictably, the crisis has intensified as a result. Hundreds of villagers have been killed in a scorched earth campaign by the ruthless army. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced, and the restorationists have become more determined still. I hope that answers the question, Ntumfoyn.
Are these claims by the Times of London obvious in the eyes of citizens of La République?
I believe so, Ntumfoyn. The experiences and examples are not far to seek. Lucifer Paul Biya has erected a Puritan money-grabbing Betty Bullock and power-mongering ethnocracy that will rather destroy Cameroon than part with their undeserved privileges. In addition, Lucifer Biya has been pampering a blood-sucking Freemason outfit that has swept life out of at least a score of clergymen, putting Cameroon in the first place as the most notorious priest killer on earth. Furthermore, Lucifer Biya has been making promises and claims of peace in Cameroon that now ring hollow as his primitive and barbaric troops prosecute targeted slaughter of Ambazonians daily and nightly. Finally, Ntumfoyn, Biya, as the patron saint of election rigging and misrule, has found himself in trouble with his newly stolen victory. Despite his manipulative tactics of abducting sub-80 students and staff from Presbyterian Secondary School Nkwen, the frying of an 8-month-old baby in boiling oil in Widekum by his uncouth army, and the quixotic arrests of journalists and peaceful demonstrators against his senile and savage rule.
And these acts are well known to the international community, or the so-called international community, right?
Ntumfoyn, they are a desperate attempt, as an example, by the satanic government of French Cameroon just to cover up its responsibility for the targeted murder of the American Fellowship Baptist missionary Charles Wesco, has backfired miserably. Wesco was killed by a French Cameroon military sniper hitman in the Bamenda neighborhood of Bambili on Tuesday, the 30th of October 2018. The targeted killing of civilians has also been prosecuted by his genocidal troops intent on exterminating the civilian population of Ambazonia, which is no longer news to anybody, especially as evidenced by the recent discussion in the British House of Lords presenting concrete and damaging evidence to that consequence. The gangster government of the Satanic Republic of Cameroon organized and carried out an official campaign of incitement against Americans and the United States interests. This criminal campaign of calumny was ongoing to cover up Reverend Wesco's murder. The campaign, as you know, was led by the Minister of External Relations of French Cameroon, Le Jeune Belambela, the Minister Delegate in charge of Defense in the Presidency of the Republic of Cameroon, Joseph Betty Asomo, the Minister in charge of Communication, Jailbird Issa Chiroma Bakari, notorious Jailbird Atangaji, who is Minister in charge of Administering Territorial Terrorism, the rattled propaganda box, CRTV, and other genocidal outfits, in addition to intellectual deadwoods serving as genocide apologists on the payroll of Lucifer Paul Biya and French Cameroon.
Isn't it the case that Biya was not invited or was disinvited from the celebration of 100 years of the end of war, the amnesties, in Paris, perhaps for his total disdain for peace? Wasn't that the reason?
Obviously, Ntumfoyn, let us refresh our minds with some historical facts. In 1928, U.S. Secretary of State Frank Kellogg and French Minister of Foreign Affairs Aristide Briand proposed that all nations join them in signing a pact outlawing war as an instrument of national policy and counseled upon all signatories to settle their disputes by peaceful means. The horrors and atrocious death toll of the First World War inspired efforts afterwards to make it the war to end wars. They obviously did not succeed, but they did lay down the way towards a structure of international law. A leading figure was Aristide Briand, who 6 times held the office of Prime Minister of France between 1909 and 1929. The United States had not joined the League of Nations when it was set up in the aftermath of the war, and in 1927, Briand, hoping to get the Americans involved in international peacekeeping, proposed that France and the US should denounce war between them. Frank Kellogg, the American Secretary of State under President Coolidge, replied by suggesting a pact for the denunciation of war by all nations to sign it. This law, the Kellogg-Briand Pact, is still in effect today, both nationally and internationally. Veterans for the Peace continue to pursue peace on a global level, is actively involved in educating the public on the unlawfulness of war. You can now see why a warmonger like Satan Paul Biya could not be accommodated in Paris for the ceremony, despite Lucifer Biya's pompous announcement of his invitation that was later cancelled. The cancellation of the invitation, humiliating as it was, demonstrates that the international community is reluctant to accommodate warmongers like Lucifer Biya around them.
What conclusions are we to draw from Biya's growing isolation by the international community?
Ntumfoyn, the simple conclusion is that the apple of Biya's satanic power of experience is stuck in his throat. Neither can he swallow it nor vomit it. Even at home, his 800 billion CFA franc trade deficit signals impending doom for the Satanic Republic of Cameroon's economy. The fact that Cameroon's fiscal year ended on the 19th or 15th of November instead of 30th of November instructs us that the economy of the Satanic Republic of Cameroon is on the ropes. Even money-lending Shylocks are reluctant to continue to dole out loans to the Satanic Republic of Cameroon.
Do you have any word of encouragement for Ambazonians who are fighting for independence, who are using all the legal means possible, including self-defense, to obtain independence for their country?
Let Ambazonians know that Lucifer Biya Paul and his gangsters and hangers-on can delay, deny, and deflect their liberation, freedom, and justice. But the clear indication is that Ambazonia must be free. There is already light at the end of the tunnel. Let Ambazonians document every war crime committed by Biya's crime-prone army on Ambaland. There must be reparations, and Ambazonia will erect its own Israeli-type Mossad that will pursue the war criminals all over the world. They may run, but they can never hide.
Now, thank you very much, Professor Tatamenta. Always a pleasure to have you.
Ntumfoyn, thank you for having me. Aluta continue, Victoria et Certa.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Because you have your army of occupation out in West Cameroon, you believe that when the people will rise, even if you took the whole of the French army and added to yours, you will never bring them down.
Right now, you can support outreach and diplomacy for the recognition of Ambazonia. There are 3 things you can do to support. You can buy a full year subscription to the Missions Tribune newspaper, the only American newspaper that has had Ambazonia on its front page 4 times in the course of 2018, and that has published an article on Ambazonia in every single edition since March of 2018. You can also get an advanced copy of the documentary film we are now completing on Ambazonia. Finally, you can get an advanced copy of the most detailed, most comprehensive human rights report on Ambazonia. All these are productions of the Africa Freedom Network, of Compass Free Press, and the Missions Tribune newspaper. We will provide you with more details in the course of next week. The UK House of Lords debated the crisis in the Cameroons last November 14.
The Cameroon is in the grip of a humanitarian disaster.
The debate, initiated by Lord Boateng of Labour, lasted well over an hour. If you did not follow the debate, relax. Ambazonia Calling has got your back. We are dedicating a huge chunk of today's edition to a detailed review of the debate, highlighting the key issues raised by British parliamentarians along 7 themes.
My lords, this crisis has its origins in a plebiscite of 1961. We live with the legacy of that plebiscite in the plight of the peoples of the Cameroon and the English-speaking peoples of the Cameroon in particular to this day.
The starting point for the MPs was to blame Britain, rightly, to blame France, rightly too, and to confess that many decades of loud complaints by Ambazonians had gone unnoticed or had been stubbornly ignored. Here to start us off with the debates is Daniel Jude Agua Ozugen.
As his name suggests, Lord Boateng's roots are in former Gold Coast, present-day Ghana, and it is thanks to him that British parliamentarians had the debate on the Cameroons. He kicked this off with an emotional statement roundly applauded by his peers and by Ambazonians, some of whom have been asking Ambazonia Calling if one of the streets in Ambazonia should not be named Lord Boateng Street. He was crystal clear on the root causes of the identity crisis.
In a flawed plebiscite that posed simply a binary question to the English-speaking regions of the Cameroon, join Nigeria or join Francophone Cameroon. That was the choice that was given them. They were not given the choice to form their own independent state.
Lord McConnell, a Labour MP, agreed with Lord Boateng. It is indeed, as he stressed, a matter of the majority lording it over the minority.
We see a conflict today between a majority and a minority, when a minority, rightly or wrongly, in most cases rightly, feels persecuted and disadvantaged by the majority, and where the majority fear the minority and therefore will not concede power.
Lord Viscount Waverley, a crossbencher in British Parliament, insisted on the errors of decolonisation, blaming Britain, among others, for mistakes. He also questions the wisdom of a plebiscite in which Britain, in violation of the United Nations Charter and its own mandate over the trust, refused to offer the people of Southern Cameroons that for which Britain was charged to prepare them. As much as Lord Waverley identified Britain's errors at the time of decolonisation, he stressed that the elephant in the room actually preventing Ambazonia from achieving independence is France.
The Quai d'Orsay possibly pressed what it considered to be an advantage by not containing this key option.
While some may still pretend that the crisis in the Cameroons has just erupted in the face of the world, Lord Alton of Liverpool, who is a crossbencher in the UK Parliament, wanted no one to forget that Ambazonians have cried loudly for nearly 6 decades, while the world has royally ignored them. This is Jude Agua Ozugen for Ambazonia Calling.
Although the debate before the House of Lords was titled Human Rights in the Cameroons, the truth, confessed openly by parliamentarians, is that what is unfolding in Ambazonia is way beyond mere human rights violations. Officials of the International Criminal Court have called it genocide. The United Nations Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide has warned it is indeed genocide. The debate by the UK parliamentarians spent some time reviewing the long list of growing fatalities, as Barrister Manjong Jutambe now reports.
It is no longer in doubt.
Cameroon has the hallmarks of the region and world sleepwalking into another humanitarian disaster, even beyond that we are witnessing today.
But United Kingdom parliamentarians wanted to make sure the record showed that the Biya regime has beaten one time too many. Mr. Biya and his cohorts have taken a country once known as an island of peace in Africa and managed to sleepwalk it into a humanitarian catastrophe.
The roll call of suffering is horrendous and a harbinger of even worse to come if, as the Noble Lord Judd has just reminded us, we fail to act. In Nigeria, there are nearly 27,000 refugees from Cameroon registered with the UNHCR. Thousands more have been forced to flee their homes, and dozens of villages have been ethnically cleansed. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and High Commissioner for Refugees, 437,000 from the Anglophone regions have been displaced, whilst the charity Protection Approaches says that 3.3 million are in need of humanitarian assistance. Amnesty reports that 450 to 500 civilians and 185 members of the security services have been killed. UNICEF estimates that 58 schools have been destroyed, 47 political leaders are being held without charge, and a recent Amnesty report refers to, and I quote, arbitrary arrests, torture, unlawful killings, and the destruction of property. The Catholic Bishops' Conference has called it, quote, inhuman, blind, monstrous violence. And of the October election, Archbishop Samuel Cleder, the president of the Bishops' Conference, says, one has the impression election results are decided before voting takes place.
Although the number of Ambazonians massacred so far is in the thousands, Lord Boateng stayed with the figures underreported by the United Nations. One major omission in what was a detailed debate was the failure on the part of the MPs to recognize that the Biya regime had declared war against Ambazonia since the 30th of November 2017. Lord Chigi, a Liberal Democrat who serves as spokesperson for Africa Affairs in the House, still thinks the Cameroons are slipping into civil war.
And with the Anglophone conflict edging towards civil war, will the Minister urge dialogue between the separatists and the government of Cameroon as a means of halting escalation? And will she call for support for an Anglophone General Conference able to negotiate with the government of the Cameroon, breaking their reliance on a military campaign to crush the rebels?
British parliamentarians picked two actors to blame for the fast deteriorating situation. The first is Britain itself and the failure of its government to address the crisis in any meaningful way, according to Lord Alton. The other culprit, and rightly so, was identified by Lord Viscount Waverley, whose accusing finger pointed directly to a certain Paul Biya being Vonder. It is very obvious that British MPs do not believe in Biya's insistence on using a military solution to a political problem. But Ambazonians must wonder if anyone is listening from Colonial Yaoundé or from Paris which supports him. This is Manjong Jude Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonia Calling. You are in the heart of the news shrine. Call us the Kalakuta Republic of commentary, opinion, and editorials.
One line that far too many observers, far too many Western capitals, and far too many international organizations have used in order to protect their interests has been to blame both sides for the fatalities in the Cameroons, for the human rights violations. It is a line that rang through some of the debate before the UK House of Lords, as Pawile Brodade now reports.
As we speak, people are held without trial, people have disappeared, kidnapped, in a dirty war out of which no one comes with any credit at all.
Lord Boateng took the bait at the very beginning of the debate by blaming both sides for the atrocities.
There have been atrocities committed on both sides.
Other MPs repeated that line, citing reports by human rights groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, which have demonstrated a high level of naivety, if not outright support for the Biya regime. Lord Collins of Highbury, who doubles as the shadow foreign affairs spokesperson in the House of Lords, pointed out that the French government has blamed only one side, pro-independence campaigners from Ambazonia.
Given the David and Goliath nature of the situation in Cameroon, I asked the Minister on what occasions has the British Prime Minister or Foreign Secretary brought this up as a matter with the French President or the Quai d'Orsay.
Lord Chitge, Africa Affairs spokesperson, took disclaimers for any responsibility in crimes, such as no responsibility for the kidnapping of students.
Separatists fighting for independence of the two English-speaking regions condemned the kidnapping in Bamenda and accused the government of staging the incident.
Not everyone buys the propaganda that both sides are to blame for the atrocities.
The grievances fueling the violence in Cameroon did not erupt overnight. We had plenty of warning, but we chose not to listen to Cameroon's Anglophone minority.
And no one explained it better than Lord Alton. According to him, blame must be put squarely at the feet of Britain's decision to abdicate her role in the 1950s and 1960s. Lord Collins of Highbury shared the same view, pointing out that Britain also failed to step in when the majority French Cameroon scrapped the federation in 1972.
I fully support his call for UK engagement in this situation, not least because of our historical responsibilities for the actions in 1961, and also, I think, a degree of abandonment thereafter when the federal system was abandoned in 1972.
The level of atrocity crimes, the gruesome nature of human rights violations, the impunity and immunity that those who have perpetrated war crimes and crimes against humanity. These abuses are only possible, said Lord Collins, because the Biya regime enjoys the support and protection of some superpowers.
My lords, we shouldn't underestimate the influence we have, but it speaks volumes that we left it to the American ambassador to express his disapproval of the Cameroonian government's brutal response to peaceful protests.
There is no worse crime than for Western powers to pay lip service to human rights, to genocide prevention, to the Never Again pledge, and yet allow thousands of Ambazonians to be slaughtered under their watch. This is Willibrod Ade for Ambazonia Calling.
Restoration train is going to restoration train. Restoration train is going to restoration train. Restoration train is sailing restoration train on the restoration journey of Ali Hibati. So get on now on the train. Everybody get on now on the train. Mothers, fathers, get on now on the train. Children, get on now on the train. Sister, brothers, get on now on the train. Husbands, wives too, get on now on the train.
Ambazonians have stressed this point before. They have explained that their situation is very unique. If anyone doubted that, British MPs added their voice last November 14 to the very unique nature of the recolonization that Ambazonians face. Here is Barrister Sia Jimvambe with a review of the parliamentary debate from the point of view of the uniqueness of the Ambazonian case.
Lord Boateng set the stage by making it abundantly clear that the plight of Ambazonians and the colonial domination they face is unique.
In no other country in the world is a linguistic, an English-speaking linguistic minority discriminated against and disadvantaged as they are in the Cameroon. And how can this House, regardless of its historical responsibilities as the holders of the mandate, which led to the creation of a federal Cameroon after independence, regardless of our responsibilities there, how can we stand by to see English peoples discriminated in this way? But equally, how can we stand by with the universal right that we are obliged to accept, the rights of people to protection? How can we stand by and allow this to happen?
Labour MP Lord Judd, who recalled his visit to Ambazonia and the hospitality he enjoyed while in the Cameroons, stated that he was mesmerized during his visit by the striking differences between the two peoples of the Cameroons, and wondered why on earth anyone ever thought that the peoples of the Cameroons were similar to the point of being able to form one country.
I remember being struck then by the immense difference in the whole character and tradition and life between West Cameroons and French Cameroons. I was bewildered as to how administrators thought that these two communities made a natural combined entity. I just didn't see it.
The debate before the UK House of Lords proved not only that Ambazonia was swindled by Britain at the time of independence, according to Lord Viscount Waverley, but also that the conspiracy to keep Ambazonians under colonial domination has been actively promoted through the last nearly 6 decades since independence. One glaring example, he added, is that the admission of the Cameroons into the Commonwealth was only approved by Yaoundé and France after the two thought, wrongly as it has now turned out to be, that admission into the Commonwealth would starve the thirst for freedom as an independent people.
Indeed, it was always envisaged by the Secretariat that the Commonwealth would take the wind out of the sail of secession. Membership was pressed for by Ambazonians against the will of Paris, with France unsurprisingly mightily resisting Cameroon's application to Commonwealth membership.
After last Wednesday's debate in the UK House of Lords, no Ambazonian should ever be unaware of the extent to which so many in the powerful West have worked against our freedom and against our independence. It should help us understand why we must fight, like everything depends upon us, because indeed it does, for Ambazonia to be free at last. This is C. Ajimbo Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonia Calling. You are in the heart of the news shrine. Call us the Calacuta Republic of commentary, opinion, and editorials.
British members of parliament were united in demanding one thing. They demanded action, urgent action. They wanted Britain to go beyond expressing concern to implementing practical solutions that bring relief to the suffering people of Ambazonia. Here is Divine Anje.
It is time for Britain not only to talk the talk, but even more importantly, to walk the talk, said Lord Boateng at the start of the parliamentary debate.
Concern is welcome, my lords, but concern is not enough. The time has come to engage with some specific purpose. And that purpose surely has to be to inculcate a national dialogue, a genuinely national dialogue within the Cameroon that is designed to address those grievances, which are real.
Several of his fellow MPs agreed. The Lords had some specific areas of interest they want Britain to take urgent action in, including the need to address the plight of refugees and the eternally displaced from the over 140 villages that have been looted and razed to the ground by La République du Cameroun forces.
What are we doing? What are we doing about shelter and non-food items, about food security, about health, vulnerable people at risk in the forest? What are we doing about water, sanitation and hygiene? What are we doing about gender-based violence? And what are we doing about education? My lords, this is the time for action and the evidence of action. It's not a time for being told yet again that we are concerned.
Lord Chige, spokesperson for Africa Affairs in the House, called for support for the Anglophone General Conference, which Christian Cardinal Toomey is championing. Despite the limited support the AGC has, and the high possibility that it would only further the colonial project, Lord George throws all of his political weight behind support for it. The more interesting calls for intervention by Britain focus on more than the AGC, as you will soon hear in the next two reports, if you keep it right here on Ambazonia Calling. This is Divine Angie for Ambazonia Calling.
As Divine Angie just mentioned, some of the very specific calls to action were for Britain to work closely with multilateral partners, the African Union, the United Nations, the European Union, among others, to help bring about solutions to the Ambazonian problem. In the next report, the monk from Ibalikumato focuses on the proposals from MPs who all argued that at the very minimum, and although unacceptable to Ambazonians, any solution must begin with a return to a two-state federation.
It would have been surprising if British MPs discussed Ambazonia without drawing parallels to the kind of crisis that the United Kingdom has experienced and offering some of the solutions they believe the United Kingdom has succeeded in implementing.
A solution would be a close-knit federation made up of two entities and thus ensuring no parting of the ways. The question of the legitimacy of territorial integrity superseding that of self-determination would not be relevant in this instance.
Lord McConnell sees no solution unless the Cameroons first returns to federalism. Lord McConnell hopes that the resolutions of the crisis in Northern Ireland and Scotland could inspire actors in the Cameroons.
What was always and still is envisaged as an acceptable solution to the English language-speaking people of Cameroon was a choice of a federation made up of two states with equal status.
And this is where Lord Waverley differs enormously with Ambazonians seeking total independence. He believes that a solution is possible with autonomy, not separation.
Building on lessons learnt, autonomy but not separation in a close-knit federation is the formula for lasting peace and should be embraced as a solution.
And while acknowledging the possibility of launching an experiment similar to the one the United Kingdom applied in Northern Ireland, Lord Judd stresses that it must be built on protections for minority rights.
Within the context of the European Union, there was a sense of equivalence. The minority population had the reassurance of the European institutions in their talks with their colleagues and fellow Northern Irish citizens.
Above everything else, Lord Viscount Waverley feels that unless the atrocities end, no solution will be possible.
It is terrible and so sad that these wounds have resurfaced. But I fear it was always going to be thus, with the exclusion of the English-speaking minority in the affairs of state.
Lord Collins called on the United Kingdom to ensure that it uses its trade deals, such as the £1.5 billion oil and gas deal, to reduce violence, ensure that human rights violations are not worsened by the deal, and that exploitation leads to poverty reduction. This is the monk from Ibalikumato for Ambazonia Calling.
When injustice becomes law, resistance becomes a duty. We, the people of West Cameroon, will resist you, and if you want to take that territory by force, you will kill to the last man before you take it.
In the closing part of this series of reports on the debate before the UK House of Lords last November 14, we will focus on the truly pragmatic solutions touched on by members of Parliament from the angles that agree completely with what Ambazonians want. Here is Brooke Stone.
One of the most widely applauded recommendations tabled as part of the debate last Wednesday came from Lord Viscount Waverley, who called for the deployment of African Union or United Nations peacekeepers to arrest the deadly crisis and bring relief to the millions in need of humanitarian assistance.
The only practical solution from distance is a political settlement with either a United Nations or African Union peacekeeping contingent being placed on the ground to enable an immediate cessation of violence, ensuring a humanitarian protective intervention, and a cooling off period to create the conditions to allow an equitable settlement to be hammered out.
For that to happen, Lord McConnell reminded the UK government that it would need to invest more than just hiring 2 additional staff members based in their High Commission in Yaoundé. For Lord Alton, the time has come for the UK government to openly recognize Ambazonia.
An international boundary separating French Cameroon from the southern Cameroons existed, affirmed in the Anglo-French Boundary Treaty of 1916 and confirmed in 1931. And if that be the case, would it not follow that the territory of the southern Cameroonians be recognized sitting alongside that of French Cameroon?
It is a view shared and supported on the floor by Lord Viscount Waverley.
Importantly, the 1964 Cairo Declaration on African Borders, reaffirmed in Article 4B of the Constitutive Act of the African Union, however, and signed off by the President of Cameroon, makes clear that demarcation of the territory of each African state is recognized as being such on the date of its independence. Does the United Kingdom government accept this to be the case, or not? Has there been subsequent declarations that nullify these issues on borders? If not, it would follow that French Cameroon and Ambazonia are both able to assert territorial integrity. At no time before or after its independence from France was the southern Cameroons part of that country known by its French name and style as La République du Cameroun.
Lord Judge sees the UK working with the African Union, the United Nations, and the European Union, along with France, in achieving any solution.
An integral part of a peace formula lies with France, my lords.
Bottom line, for all British members of Parliament, the colonial regime of Paul Biya of Cameroon and the international community must recognize that no agreement, no matter how firmly imposed, will work if it is against the interest of Ambazonians.
You can't fix these things by an imposed agreement. These things have to grow out of a commitment and will and understanding of the different parties to the situation.
It would only get worse, said Lord Collins, Shadow Foreign Affairs spokesperson, if, as the French and colonial Cameroon currently think, that they can impose their will by force of arms or military force. Wednesday was a great day for Ambazonia before the UK House of Lords, even if on ground zero the Biya regime continued to pursue its military slaughter of Ambazonians. This is Brooke Stone for Ambazonia Calling.
We don't do foolish, but when there are capital fools out there, we make it our duty to find them, and every week we crown one of them the Nyamfuka of the Week.
Here now to present the queens and the kings of foolish is our very own Veronique Vetumfe.
Finishing in third place this week is a group that has offered itself as the guinea pig of the clan-based or tribe-based county-by-county approach. They have distinguished themselves by experimenting with every one of the many unpopular as well as illegal instruments they believe they have. These include making arrests, disarming, demobilizing, and detaining freedom fighters, setting up kangaroo military courts, and handing down sentences against someone like General Arking. For remaining insensitive and unappreciative of the risk taken by those providing self-defense on ground zero. The BOYO Council is this week's third place finisher for the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the Week. The runners-up this week are those members of self-defense units on Ground Zero who continue to unveil their identity on photos, those who shoot videos and post online. When you defend your sisters, daughters and mothers from being raped, when you stand guard over your community against barbaric colonial forces, the minimum requirement for survival is that you remain anonymous. You do not copy the ways of the colonial forces. You do not set up road barricades that you use as illegal toll gates. You do not extort the very citizens you have been set to defend. Any forces claiming to be Amber Boys, yet doing these things, are this week's runners-up for the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the week. Them all. Winning the crown hands down this week are those who have raised intolerance in a form of government. Those who believe that there is no other view that can be expressed in Ambazonia unless it aligns with their political philosophy and reasoning. Those who this week called for a 5-day total shutdown of Ambazonia in order to sabotage efforts led by Christian Cardinal Tumi to host the Anglophone General Conference in BOYO. Cardinal Tumi has a right to assemble peacefully. They have a right to disagree with those who seek restoration of independence, and the latter have an obligation to show understanding and be more accommodating of that minority view. Those of us committed to restoration of independence should be even more understanding when the so-called federalists admit that they know a majority is for outright independence, for failing to show more tolerance towards pro-Tumi groups, and for advocating a 5-day shutdown of Ambazonia. The interim government group is this week's winner of the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the week. Nyamfuka them all. This is Veronique Vetimfe for Ambazonia Calling.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
Dear Joshua, for once, I am going to be of some help to you. How about I tell the world what exactly you are doing? How about I share the announcement with the entire world of what exactly you now are doing to Ambazonia and to Ambazonians? Your regime is following the script laid down by the French colonialists when they were forced to leave Guinea-Conakry after Sékou Touré said no to the continued colonization under the so-called French Community of Africa. Like the French colonialists of yesteryears in Guinea, who burned down everything, who tore down everything they could not carry away to France, who went even to the extent of poisoning cattle, colonial La République forces in Ambazonia are perfecting that script. Poor Mbororo cattle rearers have seen so many head of cattle in their flocks slaughtered and left to decay out in the fields. As with Kwakwa first and more than 140 villages after, your troops have systematically looted and burned to the ground communities where the slightest suspicion lingers that Amber Boys might be present or that anyone advocating independence may live and operate. You tried to pull off the trick of cutting off the Bamenda-Bafoussam road and blaming it on Amber Boys, but the scam misfired in your face. You staged the kidnapping of PSS Ntumfoyn students, hoping to create the same kind of worldwide denunciation of pro-independence Ambazonia movement as was generated against Boko Haram for kidnapping the Chibok girls in Nigeria's Borno state in 2014. Sadly for you, Joshua, the planner and the implementer of these devilish plans is a dropout from Form 2.5. An ex-convict who thought Mimi Murphy should graduate from his institution of higher stealing. Atango is messing you up big time. Now the entire world knows that it is you, not Amber Boys, who are the root cause of Amber hostage takings. It is you and your occupation forces in Mufti that are passing around for Amber Boys, extorting huge sums of money from the same families Amber Boys have sworn an oath to defend and are effectively defending. It is your forces from Gola that this week again killed pro-regime leaders who targeted colonial administrators and who killed the principal of a school in DONGA-MANTUNG state in the hope that you can pin the crimes on Amba fighters. The entire world now knows that you have given orders for occupation forces from your Republic of Bread and Sardine stationed in Ambazonia to deploy uniquely as assassination or killer squads all across Ambazonia. The hangman units from your regime, described as Escadron de la Mort, have been instructed to take no prisoners. You are now applying the same tactics to the war you declared against Ambazonia as France applied in the war against the Bamilekes and the Bassas, and in France's colonial war in Algeria. Your terrorist forces have been given the green light to kill with impunity and to enjoy all immunity. The instructions that have been handed down to the flat-foot soldier is that no Ambazonian is innocent, no Ambazonian life matters, none deserves to be brought to trial, not even before a kangaroo court of Angola. That would be a waste of court resources. Every Ambazonian your terrorist forces have been told is to be considered guilty and killed before anyone anywhere has time to prove them not guilty. It is the principle of injustice delayed is injustice denied, which your regime perfected when it slaughtered thousands of falsely accused soldiers in the forests of Mbalmayo for their alleged but never proven role in the failed April 6, 1984 coup d'etat. It is all about kill first and never ask any questions after, unless you too want to be of blessed memory. The world now knows, Joshua, that you have instructed your minister delegate at the presidency in charge of defense, your secretary of state for the gendarmerie, and your delegate for national security to encourage your terrorist forces in Ambazonia to slaughter any civilians they suspect of association with Ambazonia, to loot and to burn down whatever pricks their fancy. Whomever they sentence to death, effectively kill, or burn at the stakes in Ambazonia shall be considered to have been justly executed by the Republic of Bread and Sardine. That is how come General Amigo and his self-defense comrades surrendered to your terrorist forces at the Kraidai venue at KUPE in Bello, in Ambazonia's northern zone, only to be taken away in handcuffs to Bello Three Corners, where orders came from Gola for them to be executed. You changed just one thing in the gruesome execution. You got your terrorist forces not to make a video of it, and your entire regime is now persuaded that another execution in the form of beheading, similar to the one you perpetrated on Sam Sawyer, would be one beheading too many for the international community, which is why you decided against the beheading of General Amigo and his comrades in arms. Your terrorist forces executed General Amigo, and sticking with the script you have been following everywhere across Ambazonia, they domed the same weapons on his mortal remains that he and his comrades had surrendered to your forces, and once the weapons were on them, they shot pictures of the macabre scene to make believe that they were shot down in active combat. Why is it that you cannot learn anything, Joshua? Why are you so dense? Na dog born you nyamfuka. You have been listening to Ambazonia Calling. We came to you from our studios here in Washington, D.C. Our producers today, Jeff McCall, Logistics, Joe Costa, and Krista Cunningham. Our music is from Ken Wanaku, the monk, from Balikumato Vetzokov himself, from William Ford, an Amba music star of blessed memory, from Eric Matisse on the web at soundimage.org, and from Prince Ajua Alem of Ajam, Sonicatron, USA. Ambazonia Calling is a joint production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. You can find us on the web at missionstribune.com, at compassfreepress.com, and at africafreedomnetwork.com. Next Sunday is another date. Until then, keep the spirit, keep the faith, keep up the good fight for justice and independence for Ambazonia. Stay Amba strong.